recording. Hey. Chapter 11. Victory. It wasn't long before Marie was awakened in the moonlight by a strange rumbling that seemed to come from one corner of her room. It was as though pebbles were being thrown and rolled about. At the same time, she heard the nastiest whistling and squeaking. "Oh dear, the mice are here again," Marie cried out in fright. She tried to call her mother, but she couldn't make a sound or stir a muscle. And then she saw the king of mice squeeze through a hole in the wall. With flashing eyes and crown, he scurried across the floor and jumped up on the little table beside Marie's bed. "Hee hee hee!" piped the king of the mice. "Give me your sugar balls! Give me your marzipan! Or I'll bite your nutcracker to pieces!" And then, gnashing his teeth most abominably, he slipped into a hole in the wall. Marie was so frightened by the gruesome apparition that she was very pale the next morning and could hardly say a word. 100 times she was about to tell her mother or Louise or at least Fritz what had happened, but she thought, will anyone believe me? Won't they just laugh at me? Still, it was plain to her that to save Nutcracker, she would have to sacrifice her sugar balls and marzipan. That night she put a whole supply of these delicacies on the toy cabinet. Next morning her mother said, "I can't understand how all those mice could have gotten into our living room. Look, my poor Marie, they've eaten up all your sweets." And so they had. The gluttonous king of mice hadn't found the marzipan to his liking, but had gnawed at the edges with his sharp teeth, so it had to be thrown away. Marie didn't mind about the candy, actually. She was delighted, for she thought she had saved Nutcracker. So imagine how she felt that night when she heard the squeaking and squealing close to her ears. The king of the mice was back again. His eyes flashed even more dangerously than the night before, and he whistled even more disgustingly between his teeth. "Give me your sugar dolls, or I'll bite your Nutcracker to pieces." And with that, the horrid king of mice scurried away. Marie was miserable. Next morning, she went to a cupboard and looked sadly at her sugar dolls. And she had really a good reason to be sad, for you can't imagine, hinted Reader, what sweet little figures, all carved and molded from sugar little Marie Stahlbaum owned. There was a handsome shepherd with his shepherdess, tending a flock of milk-white sheep, while his dear little dog capered around them. There were 2 postmen striding along with letters in their hands, and there were 4 of the prettiest couples, sprucely dressed young German and daintily dressed young ladies, swinging in a rushing swing. There were some dancers, and behind them William Tell and the maid of Orleans, who didn't mean much to Marie, but in the far corner stood a red-cheeked child, Marie's favorite. Tears came to Marie's eyes. "Oh!" she cried, turning to Nutcracker. "Dear Mr. Blossom, I'll do anything I can to save you, but it's very hard." Nutcracker looked so pathetic that Marie, who seemed to see the mouse king 7 mouths open wide, ready to gobble the poor boy up, decided to sacrifice every one of her sugar dolls. So that night she set them all up in front of the toy cabinet, as she had the sweets the night before. She kissed the shepherd, the shepherdess, the lambs, and last of all, the red-cheeked child. But she put her child in the last row. William Tell and the maid of Orleans were up front. "This is dreadful," cried Mrs. Stahlbaum the next morning. "There must be some horrid big mouse living in the toy cabinet, because all of poor Marie's sugar dolls have been nibbled and bitten." Marie couldn't hold back her tears, but she soon smiled again, for she thought, "What does it matter, since Nutcracker is saved?" That evening, when Mrs. Stahlbaum was telling the judge about the mischief a mouse had done in the children's toy cabinet, the doctor blurted out, "It's really too bad we can't get rid of that wretched mouse that's eating up all Marie's candy." "I've got it," Fritz broke in. "The baker downstairs has an excellent gray legation secretary. I'll bring him up here, and he'll soon bite the mouse's head off, even if it's Madame Mousetrix herself, or her son, the king of the mice." "Won't that be lovely?" said Mrs. Stahlbaum, laughing. "And he'll prowl around on the chairs and the tables and knock all the cups and glasses over and do all sorts of damage." "Not at all," said Fritz. "The big legation secretary is as clever as they make them. I wish I could walk on the crest of the roof the way he does." "Please, no cats in the house at night," begged Louise, who couldn't abide cats. "Actually," said the doctor, "Fritz is right. Fritz said trap instead. Haven't we got one?" "Godfather Drosselmeyer will make us one," cried Fritz. "He invented them." All laughed, and when Mrs. Stahlbaum informed them that there was none in the house, the judge said he had several, and within the hour he had an excellent mousetrap brought from his own home. Fritz and Marie had their heads full of the judge's story about the hard nut. When Dora the cook was browning the fat, Marie trembled, and her mind filled with the story and its marvels. She said to Dora, whom she had known for years, "Oh, your Majesty, beware of Madame Mousetrix and her family." Fritz drew a sword and cried, "Let them come. I'll give them more than they bargained for." But all remained quiet under the stove and on top of it. As the judge was fastening the fat to a thin wire and ever so quietly putting the trap down next to the toy cabinet, Fritz cried out, Take care, Godfather Clockmaker, that the Mouse King doesn't play some trick on you. Oh, what a time Marie had that night. Something ice cold scurried about on her arm. Something rough and disgusting lay down on her cheek and piped and squeaked in her ear. The horrid king of the mice sat down on her shoulder. Blood-red foam poured from all 7 of his mouths, and gnashing and grinding his teeth, he piped and squeaked in her ear. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Stay away from that house. Mustn't get caught, oh precious mouse. You'll have to miss the feast. Give us your picture books. Give us your little dresses, or you'll have no peace. Nutcracker will be eaten alive. Hee hee, pee pee, squeak. Marie was beside herself with anguish. The next morning she was pale and distraught when Mother said, "That nasty mouse hasn't been caught." But believing that Marie was upset about her sweets and afraid of the mouse, her mother added, "Don't worry, child. We'll get rid of the wicked mouse. If the traps don't help, Fritz can bring in his gray legation secretary." No sooner was Marie alone in the parlor than she went to the toy cabinet and, sobbing, said to Nutcracker, "Oh, dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, what can I do for you, poor unhappy child that I am? If I give that horrid Mouse King all my picture books and even the beautiful dress the Christ child brought me, he'll just keep asking for more. I won't have anything left, and instead of you, he'll want to bite me to pieces. Oh, poor me, what shall I do?" Thus, while weeping and lamenting, Marie noticed a big bloodstain on Nutcracker's neck. It had been there since the eventful night. Now that she knew her Nutcracker was really young Drosselmeyer, the judge's nephew, she no longer carried him about in her arms and had given up kissing and fondling him. Instead, she felt rather shy about touching him altogether. Today, however, she took him carefully out of the cabinet and began to rub off the bloodstain with her handkerchief. Imagine how she felt when she suddenly noticed that the Nutcracker was growing warmer in her hand and starting to move. Quickly, she put him back on the shelf, and his lips stirred, and he said in a strained whisper, "Oh, dear Mr. Stahlbaum, honored friend, I already owe you so much. You mustn't sacrifice your picture books or your little Christmas dresses on my account. Just get me a sword. A sword is all I need. I can manage the rest, even if he—" At that words, his words ebbed away, and his eyes, which had been alive with the most fervent melancholy, became fixed and dead. Marie felt no fear. On the contrary, she danced for joy, for now she knew a way of saving Nutcracker without any more painful sacrifices. But where was she to find the little fellow's sword? She decided to ask Fritz for advice, and that evening, when their parents had gone out, and the 2 children were sitting by themselves beside the glass cabinet in the living room, she told him the whole story of the Nutcracker and the King of the Mice, and explained why it was needed to save the Nutcracker. What upset Fritz the most was hearing from Marie's lips said that his hussars had given such a poor account of themselves in the battle. He asked her in dead earnest if that was really true, and when she gave him her word that it was, he went straight to the cabinet and treated his hussars to a stirring harangue. To punish them for their cowardice, he cut the insignia off their caps one by one, and forbade their band to play the Hussars' March for exactly 1 year. And thus, after discharging his disciplinary duties, he finally turned to Marie. "I can get Nutcracker a sword," he said, "because only yesterday I pinched it off an old colonel of the cuirassiers. He won't be needing his fine sharp sword anymore." The colonel in question was living on his pension in the hindmost corner of the storied shelf. Fritz took him out, relieving him of his silver saber, and slung it around Nutcracker's waist. The next night, fear and dread had kept Marie awake. At the stroke of 12, she seemed to hear strange sounds, a clanging and a crashing in the parlor, and then suddenly, squeak! "The Mouse King! The Mouse King!" cried Marie. Stricken with horror, she jumped out of bed. All was still, but soon she heard a soft knocking at the door and a faint little voice. "Esteemed Mr. Stahlbaum, open the door and have no fear. I bring good news." Recognizing young Drosselmeyer's voice, Marie threw on the dressing gown and opened the door. There stood Nutcracker, holding the bloody sword in his right hand and a wax candle in his left. The moment he saw Marie, he went down on his knee and said, "You alone, dear lady, gave me the courage and strength to fight the insolent varlet who dared to defy you. The treacherous King of the Mice has been vanquished and lies writhing in his blood. Deign, dear lady, to accept these tokens of victory from the hand of one who will be your true and faithful knight until death." With that, Nutcracker adroitly stripped off the Mouse King's 7 golden crowns, which he had been wearing on his left arm, and handed them to Marie, who accepted them with delight. Then Nutcracker rose to his feet and continued, "Oh, Mr. Stahlbaum, what splendid things I can show you in this hour of victory over my enemy, if you would be kind enough to follow me a little way. Come with me, I beg you, dear mistress." Chapter 12. The Land of the Dolls. I don't think any of you children would have hesitated for a moment to follow the honest, good-natured Nutcracker, who had never a wicked thought in all his life. And Marie was all the more inclined to go with him, as she knew what a debt of gratitude he owed her, and was sure that he would keep his word and show her all manner of splendid things. So she said, "I'll go with you, Mr. Drosselmeyer, but don't let it be too far or take too long, because I haven't had enough sleep yet." "In that case," Nutcracker replied, "I'll take the shortest route, though it's a rather hard one." He went ahead and Marie followed. He finally stopped outside the big closed cupboard in the entrance hall. To Marie's surprise, the door of the cupboard was wide open, and she could see her father's box for a traveling coat, which was hanging at the foot of the cupboard. Nutcracker climbed nimbly, hanging on the loops and trimmings until he was able to get a hold of the big tassel that was fastened by a heavy cord at the back of the coat. When he pulled the tassel, a little cedar-wood ladder came down through the sleeve. "Now, Miss Stahlbaum," said Nutcracker, "if you just climb that ladder." Marie climbed and soon passed through the sleeve. When she looked out through an echo, a bright light met her eyes, and she found herself in a fragrant meadow, dotted with millions of gem-like sparks. "This is Candy Meadow," said Nutcracker, "but in a moment, we'll pass through that arch." Looking up, Marie saw the beautiful arch, which was only a few steps away. It appeared to be a white, brown, and raisin-colored marble, but when she went closer, she saw it was actually made of baked almonds and raisins, for which reason, as Nutcracker informed her, it was called Almond and Raisin Arch. The arch was enriched by a gallery that seemed to be made of sugar, and 6 little monkeys in red jackets were playing Turkish music. The music was so beautiful that Marie hardly noticed the pavement they were walking on, which looked like mottled marble, but was really made of artfully molded nougat. Soon she was surrounded by sweet smells given off by the woods on either side of the path. Glittering lights in the dark foliage proved to be gold and silver fruits hanging from the stems of many different colors. The trunks and branches were decorated with ribbons and bunches of flowers like the members of some of the joyful wedding party. When the orange-scented zephyrs stirred, the leaves and branches rustled, and the tinsel tinkled and cracked like merry music, to which the sparkling lights hopped and danced. Marie was in 7th heaven. "Oh, it's so wonderful here," she sighed. "This, mistress," said Nutcracker, "Christmas wood." "Oh, Marie." "Oh," said Marie. If I could only stay here a while. Oh, it's so lovely." Nutcracker clapped his hands, and several little shepherds and shepherdesses, hunters and huntresses, all appeared, all so white you'd have thought they were made of pure sugar. They had all been strolling about in the woods, but Marie hadn't noticed them before. Now they brought up a dear little golden chair, and put in a white licorice cushion, and so graciously he bade Marie be seated. Now she had no sooner done so than shepherds and shepherdesses danced a charming ballet, while the hunters played ever so gently on their horns. But then, as if at a signal, they all vanished into the woods. "I beg your pardon," said Nutcracker. "I humbly beg your pardon, dear Mr. Stahlbaum, that the ballet should have ended so wretchedly. But you see, these performers are all members of our mechanical ballet, so they can only do the same thing over and over again. And if the hunters played so sleepily and feebly, there are reasons for that too. It's true that the candy basket hangs right over their noses on Christmas trees, a little too high. A little too high. But suppose we go on a little way?" "I thought it was all perfectly lovely," said Marie, getting up and following Nutcracker. They skirted a gently whispering brook, where it seemed to be the source of all the delightful smells the woods were full of. "This is Orange Brook," said Nutcracker. "It smells good, but it's not nearly as big and beautiful as Lemonade River. They both empty into Almond Milk Lake." And indeed, Marie soon heard her gurgling and splashing, and saw the broad Lemonade River flowing in great biscuit-colored waves between banks and covered with bushes that glittered like rubies. It gave off a cooling freshness that strengthened heart and lungs. Not far away, a dark yellow stream dragged itself sluggishly along, but the scent it gave off was uncommonly sweet. Beautiful children were sitting on its banks, fishing with plump little fishes, which they ate the moment they caught them. When she came closer, Marie noticed that the fishes looked like hazelnuts. A little way downstream, there was a sweet little village. Houses, church, parsonage, barns, all were dark brown and but roofed with gold, and many of the walls looked as if the mortar had been studded with shelled almonds and candy lemon peel. "That's Gingerbread City," said Nutcracker. "It's on Honey River. inhabitants are beautiful, but most are dreadfully cranky because they have awful toothaches, so we won't stop there now. Just then Marie caught sight of a town made of vari-colored, transparent houses. When they reached it, Marie heard a merry hubbub and saw thousands of lovely little people unloading heavy wagons that were drawn up in the marketplace. What they hauled from the wagons looked like colored paper and chocolate bars. "This is Bonbon Town," said Nutcracker. "A shipment has just arrived from Paperland and the King of Chocolate. The poor kindly towners have received threatening messages from the Prince of Mosquitoes. So now they're covering their houses with special paper and building fortifications with the finely wrought tables sent by the King of Chocolate. But, my dear Mr. Starbaum, we can't visit every small town and village in this country. The capital is the place. On to the capital!" Nutcracker hurried ahead, and Marie, bursting with curiosity, followed. Soon the air was filled with the scent of roses, and everything seemed covered with a soft roseate glow, reflected, as Marie could see, from a rose-red stream, whose silvery rose waters lapped and gurgled most musically. Gradually, the stream widened and became a lake filled with silvery-white swans floating on it. They wore gold necklaces and vied with one another in singing the prettiest songs, while diamond fish leaped in and out of the rosy waters in a merry dance. "Oh!" cried Marie in delight. "This is like Godfather Drossmore was going to make for me, and I'm the little girl who was going to pat the swans." Nutcracker smiled as though she had said something foolish. "Uncle never could make a lake," he said. "You said yourself that you yourself would be much more likely to. But instead of worrying our heads over that, let's sail across this rosy lake to the capital." Alright. A little update on these illustrations here. Water? We're gonna start some. Have another Reineke track to play here.
We're up before you wake, and sometimes we miss bedtime, but we make a house a home. Because we're fighting for the future. Missouri soybeans. Our roots run deep.
Chapter 13, The Capital. Nutcracker clapped his little hands. The wind came roaring over the lake and the waves rose higher. A gondola made entirely of glittering jewels appeared in the distance and quickly came closer. It was drawn by 2 dolphins with golden scales. 12 dear little Moors with caps and little aprons of gleaming hummingbird feathers. Ray leaped ashore and carried first Marie, the Nutcracker, to the gondola, which quickly started off again. Oh, how lovely it was for Marie to glide over the waters in the gondola, and the scent of the roses all about her in the rosy waves below. The 2 golden dolphins raised their nostrils and spouted crystal streams high into the air, and as the spray fell into film of rainbows, 2 silver voices sang, "Who is this on the rosy water? A fairy or a fairy's daughter? Bim bim, little fishes, sim sim, golden swans. Fairies, come hither, fly through the spray. Splish splash, splish splash, the rosy spray." But the 12 little Moors who had jumped up on the back of the gondola seemed to take offense at the singing streams of water, for they shook their parasols so violently that the palm leaves they were made rattled, and at the same time they stamped their feet in a strange rhythm and sang, "Clip, clop, clip, clop, down and up, Blackamoor's feet never stop. Swans and fishes wiggle and glide, gondola must smoothly ride. Clip-clop, clip-clop. Those Moors are all very well, he said, but if they keep that up, they're going to make the whole lake rebellious. And true enough, a deafening hubbub broke out, a medley of strange voices that seemed to be partly in the air and partly in the water. But Marie paid no attention to them, for she was looking into the frequent rose waves, from each of which a charming little girl's face smiled at her. "Oh!" she cried, clapping with her hands. "Look, Mr. Drosselmeyer, Princess Pirlipat is down there. She's smiling at me as sweet as she can be. Oh, dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, do look and see." But Nutcracker sighed and almost sorrowfully said, "Dear Mr. Stahlbaum, that's not Princess Pirlipat, that's you, your own self. It's your own sweet face smiling at you out of the waves." At that, Marie raised her head, closed her eyes tight, and felt ashamed. And just then the 12 little Moors lifted her out of the carriage and carried her ashore. She found herself in a small thicket that was almost more beautiful than the Christmas wood. Everything had sparkled and glittered. But the most wonderful of all were the strange, wonderfully colored fruits, which gave us a delicious fragrance. "This," said Nutcracker, "is Marmalade Grove, and just over there, you see the capital." And what did Marie see? How shall I even begin to describe the beauty and splendor of the city that had now lay before her on a broad, flowery plain? Not only were the walls and towers of the most magnificent colors, but the shapes of buildings were like nothing else on earth. For instead of roofs, the houses were delicately painted crowns, and the towers were wreathed in very colored foliage. As the two of them emerged from the city gateway, which looked as if it had been made of macaroons and candy nuts, there were her soldiers presented arms, and a little man in a brocade dressing gown threw his arms around Nutcracker and said, "Welcome, noble prince! Welcome to Confectburg." Well, Marie was a little surprised that so very distinguished person should recognize Drosselmeyer as a prince. Then she heard so many fine little voices clamoring all at once, such rejoicing and laughter, such singing and playing, that she forgot everything else, and she had to ask Nutcracker what it all meant. Play a little. "Oh, most honored Mr. Stahlbaum," Nutcracker replied. "There's nothing unusual about it. Confectburg is a big, bustling city. It's like this every day. Let's just go on a little farther." They had taken only a few steps when they came to a large marketplace that was most amazing to behold. The houses around it were all made of sugar filigree. There were whole tiers of arcades, and in the middle stood an obelisk of cake with white icing around, which with 4 beautifully carved fountains spouted orangeade, lemonade, and other tasty sweet drinks. And the basin was full of custard that you might have eaten with a spoon. But prettiest of all were the delightful little people, thousands of whom came thronging together from all sides, laughing and singing and joking, in short, the merry hubbub that Marie had heard in the distance. And there were beautifully dressed ladies and gentlemen. There were Armenians and Greeks, Jews and Tyroleans, officers and common soldiers, clergymen, preachers, and shepherds and crowns, as many different kinds of people as there are in the world. On one corner, the tumult was wilder than elsewhere. People were scattering in a panic because the Grand Mogul was being carried past in a litter escorted by 93 grandees of the Empire and 700 slaves. But it so happened that on the next corner, 500 members of the Fishermen's Guild were putting on their annual parade, and unfortunately the Sultan of Turkey had taken into his head to come riding across the marketplace at that very moment with 3,000 Janissaries. To make matters worse, the grand procession of the interrupted sacrifice came on at the same time. The band played, and the adepts marched toward the obelisk, intoning to him, "Arise, give thanks to the sun." The result was a pushing and shoving and squeaking. Soon there were cries of lamentation, for the crush of fishermen had knocked down a Brahmin's head off, and the Grand Mogul was almost run down by a clown. People were beginning to punch and pound one another when the man in the brocade dressing gown, who had hailed Nutcracker as a prince, climbed up on the obelisk. An extraordinarily loud bell was rung 3 times, and he cried aloud, "Pastry cook! Pastry cook! Pastry cook!" Instantly the hubbub died down, the processions disentangled themselves as best they could, the sword of Mogul was brushed off, and the Brahmin's head was pasted back on. Whereupon the same merry hubbub as before began all over again. "Dear Mr. Drosselmeyer," Marie asked, "what's all this about a pastry cook?" "Ah, Mr. Stahlbaum," Nutcracker replied, "here the name of pastry cook is given to an unknown but cruel spirit, which is thought to have total power over the people. It is the destiny that governs the Merry nation, and the people stand so much in awe of it that, as the Lord Mayor has just shown, the wildest swords can be quelled by the mere mention of the name. When that happens, no one thinks of earthly matters such as pokes in the ribs or clouds over the head. Everyone looks within and says to himself, "What is man? And what can be done with him?" Marie could not repress surprise, and admiration when she saw herself before a castle with 100 lofty towers bathed in a roseate glow. Now and then splendid bouquets of violet daffodils, tulips, and gillyflowers were strewn over its walls, accentuating the pinkish whiteness of the background with their glowing dark colors. The gigantic dome of the central building and the pyramidal roofs of the towers were sprinkled with thousands of gold and silver stars. "This," said Nutcracker, "is Marzipan Castle." Marie lost herself in contemplation of the magic castle, but it didn't meet her that one of the main towers had no roof, and some little men perched on a scaffolding of cinnamon sticks, evidently trying to put one on. But before she had time to question Nutcracker, he explained, "Not so long ago, this castle was threatened with destruction. The giant sweet tooth came along, gobbled up the roof of that tower, and was nibbling at the big dome. The citizens of Confliktburg bought him off by offering him a whole precinct of the city and a considerable part of Marmalade Grove. The giant accepted the offer, gorged himself, and went on his way." At that moment, soft music was heard. The gates of the castle opened, and out stepped 12 pages holding lighted clothes sticks as torches. Their heads were pearls, their bodies rubies and emeralds, and they had tripped along on beautifully worked little feet of pure gold. After them came 4 ladies almost as big as Marie's Clara, but so richly and splendidly attired that Marie knew they could only be princesses. After embracing Nutcracker tenderly, they cried out, "Oh, my prince! My beloved prince! Oh, my brother!" Nutcracker seemed deeply moved. He wiped floods of tears from his eyes, took hold of Marie's hands, and said with great feeling, "This is Mistress Marie Stahlbaum, the daughter of an eminent physician. She saved my life. If she hadn't thrown her slipper at the right time, if she hadn't outfitted me with the pension colonel's sword, I'd be lying in my grave, bitten to pieces by the abominable king of the mice. Tell me now, can Perlipat, though a true princess, hold a candle to Mistress Stahlbaum for beauty, kindness, and virtue? No, I say, she cannot." All the ladies sobbed, "No!" and fell on Marie's neck, gasping through her sobs. "Oh, noble savior of our beloved princely brother, excellent Mistress Stahlbaum!" The ladies led Marie and Nutcracker to an inner room whose walls were made of sparkling colored crystal. What Marie liked best about the place were the dear little chairs, tables, bureaus, writing desks, and so on, all made of cedar or Brazil wood strewn with golden flowers. The princesses bade Marie and Nutcracker be seated and announced their intention of preparing a meal with their own hands. First, they set out lots of little dishes and bowls of the finest Japanese porcelain, and plenty of spoons, knives, forks, graters, casseroles, and other kitchenware, all of gold and silver. Then they brought in the most wonderful fruit and candy Marie had ever seen, and began with their little snow-white hands to squeeze the fruit, crush the spices, and grate the sugared almonds. In short, they did all they could to show Marie what first-rate cooks they were, and what a splendid meal she could look forward to. Knowing that she too was well versed in such matters, she secretly wished that she could be allowed to give the princesses a hand. As though reading Marie's mind, the most beautiful of Nutcracker's sisters handed her a little golden mortar, saying, "Dear sweet friend, you who saved our brother's life, would you care to prepare some end of this rock candy?" While Marie pounded the rock candy so cheerfully that the mortar murmured at a kind of song, Nutcracker related slowly and at great length the history of the cruel war between the Mouse King's army and his own, how the cowardice of his troops had brought about his defeat, how the hideous king of mice had been on the point of biting to pieces, and Marie had been obliged to sacrifice a good many of his subjects who were in his service, etc. As Marie listened to her story, it seemed more to her that his words and even the strokes of her pestle sounded more and more faint and distant. Soon she saw a silvery mist which seemed to rise up and engulf the princesses, the pages, Nutcracker, and herself. She heard a strange singing and whirring and buzzing which ebbed away in the distance. Higher and higher she rose, as though mounting on waves. Higher and higher and higher! Alright, so I get the last track I'm gonna play queued up and ready to go. Alright. Chapter 14. Conclusion. Then came a poof and a plop as Marie he fell from an immense height. My, what a tumble. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in her lower bed. It was broad daylight, and Mother was standing there. How can anyone sleep so long? Her mother exclaimed. Breakfast was ready long ago. Of course, they really realized that Marie, befuddled by all the wonderful things she had seen, had finally fallen asleep in the marzipan castle, and that the pages, or possibly even the princes themselves, had carried her home and put her to bed. Oh, Mother, dear Mother, you can't imagine all the places young Mr. Drosselmeyer took me to last night, and all the beautiful things I've seen. Then she told the whole story almost exactly as I've just told you. Her mother looked at her in amazement. You've had a long, beautiful dream, dear Marie, but now you must really forget about all that nonsense. Marie went on insisting that it wasn't a dream, that she had really seen all those things. Her mother took her to the glass-fronted cabinet, pointed at Nutcracker, who was standing on the third shelf, as usual, and said, Silly child, how can you imagine that this wooden doll from Nuremberg is really alive and capable of moving about? But, Mother dear, said Marie, I know Nutcracker is young Mr. Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, Godfather Drosselmeyer's nephew. Dr. and Mrs. Stahlbaum burst out laughing. Marie was on the verge of tears. Oh, Father dear, now you're laughing at my Nutcracker, and he spoke so well of you. When he came to the Marzipan Castle and introduced me to the princess his sisters, he referred to you as an eminent physician. The laughter grew louder. Louise and even Fritz joined in. Marie went into the other room, brought back her little box, and took out the Mouse King's 7 crowns and handed them to her mother. Look, Mother, these are the Mouse King's 7 crowns which young Mr. Drosselmeyer gave me last night in token of his victory. Mrs. Stahlbaum looked in amazement at the 7 crowns, which were made of some sparkling metal, worked more skillfully than seemed possible for human hands. When the doctor, too, had feasted his eyes on the little crowns, both father and mother urged Marie to tell them where they had come from. When the child could only repeat what she had said before, and when her father scolded her severely, went so far as to call her a liar, she burst into tears and cried out, oh dear, what do you want me to say? At that moment the door opened. The judge came in, crying, oh, what's going on? What has made my beloved godchild cry? The doctor told him the whole story and showed him the little crowns. The judge took one look at them and said, Stuff and nonsense. These are little crowns I used to wear on my watch chain. I gave them to Marie for her 2nd birthday. Don't you remember? Neither Dr. nor Mrs. Stahlbaum remembered a thing. But when Marie saw her parents smiling again, she took courage, ran to Godfather Drosselmeyer and said, You know everything, Godfather Drosselmeyer. Won't you please tell them that my Nutcracker is your nephew, young Mr. Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, and that he gave me the little crowns? But the judge made a stern face and muttered, Stuff and nonsense. And Dr. Stahlbaum looked severely at his daughter and said, Look here, Marie, you're to forget about this foolishness once and for all. If I ever hear you saying this ugly, simple-minded Nutcracker is Drosselmeyer's nephew, I'll throw Nutcracker out of the window and all your other dolls as well, including Mistress Clara. After that, of course, Marie couldn't say another word about her adventures, though her heart was still full of them. For, as you can easily imagine, it's not so easy to forget such grand and beautiful things as Marie had seen. Even, esteemed reader, listener Fritz, even your friend Fritz Stahlbaum turned his back on his sister whenever she began to tell him about the wonderful country she had been to and been so happy. He is even said to have muttered once or twice between his teeth, Silly goose. In view of his usual good nature, I find this hard to believe. But this much is certain. From then on, he ceased to believe anything Marie told him. He formally apologized to his hussars for the injustice he had done them, replaced the insignia he had taken away from them with tall goose plumes, and gave them leave to play the Hussars of the Guard march again. Which was all well and good, but you and I know what a sorry figure the hussars cut when the nasty red pellets began making spots on the red tunics. Though forbidding to speak of her adventure, Marie continued to be haunted by memories of the fairyland she had seen. Whenever she turned her mind to it, she saw it all again. Instead of playing as usual, she would sit still for hours deep in thought. The others all scolded her and called her a little dreamer. One day, the judge happened to be repairing one of the Stahlbaum clocks. Marie was sitting by the glass-fronted cabinet, lost in her dreams and gazing at Nutcracker. Suddenly, quite of their own accord, the words popped out of her. "Oh, dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, if you were really alive, I wouldn't be like Princess Perlipat. I wouldn't scorn you because you would stop being a handsome young man on my account." On hearing that, the judge exploded, "Stuff and nonsense!" But in that same moment, there was such a bang and jolt that Marie fell in a faint from her chair. When she came to, her mother was watching her and said, "How can a big girl like you fall off her chair like that? The judge's nephew from Nuremberg is here, so be on your good behavior." Marie looked up. The judge had put his glass wig and his yellow coat back on and was smiling happily. He was holding by the hand a small but shapely young man with a little face as white as milk and as red as blood. He was wearing a magnificent red coat trimmed with gold and white silk stockings and slippers. Amidst the ruffle of his shirt, he was carrying a splendid, charming bouquet. He was elegantly curled and powdered and had a splendid pigtail hanging down from behind. The little sword at his side sparkled as if it were all made of jewels, and the little hat under his arm was woven of silk fibers. The young man had charming manners, which he displayed by bringing Marie all sorts of lovely toys, figures of the finest marzipan, including those that the king of mice had bitten to pieces, and a beautiful saber for her foots. At the table, he obligingly cracked nuts for the whole company. Even the hardest could not resist him. With his right hand, he put them in his mouth. With his left, he pulled his pigtail, and crack! The shell broke into pieces. Marie turned as red as a beet when she saw the young man, and she turned even redder after dinner when the young Drosselmeyer asked her to go with him to the glass cabinet of the parlor. "Go and play, children," said the judge. "Now my clocks are telling the right time. I have no objection." No sooner was young Drosselmeyer alone with Marie than he went down on one knee and said, "Oh, my precious Mr. Stahlbaum, you see at your feet the happiest of men, whose life you saved on this very spot. You were kind enough to say that you would not scorn me as that nasty Princess Perlipat did, for becoming ugly on your account. In that instant, I ceased to be a lowly Nutcracker and regained my former not unpleasant aspect. Oh, precious Mr. Stahlbaum, favor me with your hand, share my crown and kingdom with me, reign with me over Marzipan Castle, for I am king there now." Marie raised the young man to his feet and said softly, "Dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, you are a good, kind gentleman, and since in addition you rule over a charming country full of pretty amusing people, I accept you as my betrothed." So then Marie was engaged to Drosselmeyer. In a year and a day, he called for her in a golden carriage drawn by silver horses. At the wedding, 28,000 of the most brilliant figures adorned with pearls and diamonds danced. And Marie is believed to still be the queen of a country with sparkling Christmas woods, transparent marzipan castles. In short, the most wonderful things can be seen if you have the right sort of eyes for it. And that's the story of Nutcracker and the King of Mice.